Morning, everybody. How's it going? Okay, all right, it's going okay. I can see that. Hey, it's good to see you. It's a privilege to be able to communicate some of God's Word with you. If you're new to New Life or visiting for the first time in a while, you probably already have a gist of what we're about. That we are pretty in love with Jesus and believe that what He has done for us has given us new life in Him. And we'll even get to talk about that a little bit today. And if you don't know me, or we haven't got to talk much, or you just like the sound of my voice as much as I do, my name is Caleb, and I am, I'm on staff here, so I get a chance to communicate. A couple other things about me, so you can feel like you know me before I speak to you. I got a Fitbit for graduation. Yeah, any Fitbit wearers out there? Yeah, or off-brand Fitbit? Yeah, there you go, Jake. I really enjoy it. I'm a little obsessed with it. I find myself sometimes walking around a living room before bed because I'm just a couple steps away from that goal, which is just absurd. I'm taking laps in my kitchen just so I can get to whatever. But I enjoy it. It's fun, and it's got cool little lights on it. So, yeah, that's fun. I just graduated. Hey-o. Yeah, I did. Second time. First time wasn't good enough, so I went back. And I am officially leaving the world for now of career services. As you know me, I've been a career advisor for 2 years, and I just accepted a job in Lincoln Tower, so I'll be over there, and I'm leaving the career services world, which I'm gonna miss, but it's fun. And career advice is it's kind of fun to give, and it's not so bad when you get used to it. I feel like I got pretty good at it. Honestly, I'm not gonna lie. If you ever need help with your resume, I'd be happy to destroy it for you. In fact, you can meet, and I can destroy it right in front of your face. It'll be great, okay? But then it'll be better, so it's fine. It's going to be fine. I could give you a piece of free career advice right now. Would you be interested in that? Yeah. A little bit. You don't have to rely. It's not that exciting, but I appreciate it. So, behavioral interviewing. Anybody know what that is? Give me a hand if you're like from that category. Just a couple of you, all right? This is the, and I'm serious. This is real career advice, all right? Not just a sermon illustration. So, behavioral interviewing is the most common style of interview questions that are asked. And it starts like this. Tell me an example of a time when. Yeah, sound familiar? Give me an example when. Tell me about a situation when. Okay? Now, those of you who know anything, do you know like a pattern for how you're supposed to answer this? Jimmy?
You give real examples.
Yeah! That's really important. You give a specific example or task, and then you talk about what you did, and then you talk about the result. Or we say circumstance, action, result, the car model, vroom, vroom. All right? That was a motorcycle, sorry. Vroom, vroom. There you go. Yeah, the car model. So you always want to give a very specific situation. And students don't do that too often. If people say, like, tell me about a time when you went above and beyond at work, they'll say, like, oh, I go above and beyond all the time. I'm all the time going above and beyond. Every task, my boss just told me the other day, Caleb, you do 2 things well, above and beyond. Yeah. And then that's all they said. It's like, okay, well, that's a 0 out of 100. Because, there's no specific example, so you want to be able to do that. And I can tell you some other really good ones, and I'm going to hold off on that because of like student privacy laws or whatever, but if you ask me in private, I'll totally tell you some. Alright, so ask me about that later. But the reason why employers ask behavioral questions is because it makes you tell a situation from past experience, which is the best way to know something about you. For example, Alex, let's pretend like we're in an interview right now. It's going to be easy. I'm not going to ask you a hardball, I promise. So let's say that this was how interviewing worked, and just answer like you want the job, okay? Hey, Alex, we need someone who's good at teamwork. Are you good at teamwork, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, great. We need someone who has leadership potential. Do you have leadership potential?
Yes.
Okay, good. And then we definitely need someone who has experience and comfortable working with a diverse population. Is that you?
Yes.
Hired. Everybody give Alex a hand. Good job. Good job. Good job. Okay? So you can't ask questions like that because everyone would give an inflated subjective view about themselves to get the job, But if you say, tell me about a time when you've had an experience working with a diverse population, you should see the terrible answers people give. Just really bad. So because you can't, you got to be able to give something from the past. Or tell me about a time when you've had conflict with someone, and what did you do? And people will just go like, I worked with this dude in a project and he was the worst. He didn't, he was terrible, he was rude, and they just start bashing this person. It's like, okay, I'm gonna guess you probably don't handle conflict that well if like you're 100% everything is their fault and I was perfect. but people just go on. Okay, so the questions work because a lot of times if we look at the experience or the story that someone's had, we can draw stuff out from it and be able to tell something about them that maybe they wouldn't say about themselves in a yes or no question. Okay, now, that's free advice for you. You can take it, and remember, car. Okay, you got circumstance, what did you do, and the result. Try not to look like a tool. All right, most people do when they tell this story, so don't look like a tool. But more importantly, why I would share that with you today, which is not a career services presentation, is that that's kind of what we're doing as we go through right now one of the oldest books ever, well, at least one of the oldest ones in the Bible, the book of Genesis. And what we're doing is we're looking at stories in the book of Genesis about God and humanity and their relationship with each other. And we're able to look at these stories of what happened and draw stuff out from them to see exactly what is God like? What is the God of the Bible like? What does the Bible say human beings are like in the nature of humanity? And we can kind of hear stories and see things from that. Okay, so that's kind of what we've been doing this series, what we're going to continue to do, and what we're going to do today with the story of Noah, which if you have the Bible on you and you want to open it, will be in Genesis 6. And if you don't, there's no one in the front row, so I'm just going to get real cozy. Right? And if you don't, it'll be on the screen, so it's okay. But I want you to be thinking as we read through this, what are some things that we can learn about God? What are some things that we can learn about us and our relationship with Him? Okay, and we'll be looking for those kind of things as we go through. And then don't forget to ask me for really embarrassing stories of answers people have given, because I would want to tell you about those later. Okay, I'm going to read, but first I'd like us to pray. Okay, so let's do that. God, thank you so much for this morning, for a chance to be able to meet with you and meet with one another. I also just lift up, God, everybody in this great city of Columbus who is meeting together to learn from your word and to hear you, our brothers and sisters out there, that you would just be communicating to your whole city here, God, that we care a lot about. I thank you so much that we have a chance to actually get to know something about you and your heart for us and how we can relate to you, and I pray that you be speaking that to us this morning. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so we're going to look at the story of Noah. Is everyone semi-familiar with that? Noah and the flood and the ark and the animals? Yeah. I sang a really awesome song about that when I was a kid, which I'm going to spare you. But again, later you can ask me about it. I tried to get Chris to do it for worship this morning, but he wouldn't do it. I even recommended I could give the motions, but apparently that was not a good example. So whatever. Noah, okay, the story of Noah in Genesis is a pretty ancient text, all right? It's definitely thousands of years old. This story particularly is pretty hotly debated in a lot of different spheres, okay? Geologically and archaeologically, lots of debate out there, okay? With most scientists and academia saying that, the geological record just couldn't be coherent with the story of a universal flood. Some scientists who identify themselves as creation saying that a universal flood is the only thing that makes the geological record make sense, and people all the way in between. Also, it's debated in literature, because I don't know if you're familiar with this, and it's pretty cool in my book. There's actually several stories from the ancient Near East that tell of a flood, a universal flood. And some people say, oh, see, the fact that there are multiple stories demonstrate that it's just a myth, that it was shared around and copied, like some myths are. And then other people say, no, the fact that there are the same accounts, different places of the same event happening, seem to point that maybe something like this did happen. And you have stories all the way in between. Okay? But what I really want us to focus on today is from this book, this theological text, meaning like the study of God and what He's like. What can we learn about God and us from what we read in here? And I'll tell you that this flood story, particularly in Noah, is definitely unique among all other ones in its conception of who God is and who we are. There's nothing like it, and I'll be able to explain a little bit about that as we go. But it's pretty, in my opinion, a pretty rich text. There's some really cool things to learn and uncover in here, and so that's what I want to do. And if you have your little bulletin, on the back side, there's some notes and little blank spots and all kinds of fun stuff. So you can take some notes along, and I'll try to point out to what those are, and I think even John will put some of that on the screen for us. So the very first theme, we're going to look at 4 themes and then kind of draw a moral of the story. Okay, so that's the game plan. Okay. So the very first theme is the state of humankind. The state of humankind. All right. So that's what we're going to be looking at. All right. And we're going to start at Genesis 6, and I'm going to read verse 5 and then verse 12. Okay. So verse 5 says, "The Lord saw that humanity had become thoroughly evil on the earth, and that every idea their minds thought of was always completely evil." And then that's pretty strong right there. That's some strong language. Verse 12 says, "God saw that the earth was corrupt, because all creatures behaved corruptly on the earth." Okay? So what we learn about the state of humankind in this particular moment in human history is that it is evil and entirely corrupted. Some theologians say that this is the harshest critique of humanity at any given point in the Bible. That things just were really, really terrible at this moment in time. Okay, so yeah, you can kind of look through, and we're just in the 6th chapter of this first book. And you know, at the beginning, this is totally counter to what was written at the beginning. Andy spoke 2 weeks ago about the very first couple chapters in Genesis, and what's the common word? God creates things, and then he says it's good. Yeah, that's like all over that chapter. Good, good, good. All over this chapter, evil, evil, evil. Corrupted, corrupted, corrupted. Okay, just 6 chapters in. And it seems, and you can see even from when Ed spoke yesterday, we had just the first thing is God says don't eat of that fruit. They ate of the fruit, things got bad. Just one generation later, we have fratricide, or a brother killing a brother. And that's pretty intense. Okay, so things, and then the Bible indicates that things just kept getting worse and worse. And just 6 chapters in, towards the beginning, we see that things are totally, fully corrupted. It says that, and this is so strong, that every idea their minds thought up was always completely evil. Some of your versions might say every intention of their heart or every imagination was completely evil. And this is a pretty unique statement because humanity, we have something unique about us in creation, that we have the ability to create and imagine and to cast vision and to dream dreams about ourselves and to make things happen in the world and in human societies. And the Bible's saying that even that thing that God endowed us, that made us uniquely special and human, had become corrupted. That thing that puts us in the image of, one of the things that puts us in the image of God, that he creates and we're able to create, even that was corrupted. And all human beings were creating at that time were completely, totally evil. So things are as bad as they could possibly be. Okay? Like I said, it was the most condemning scripture of humankind. But, that being said, the Bible's general stance moving forward is still, there's some similarities about what it says about humanity, even as time moved on, even today. So I just want to, I'll read a couple for you, but Psalm 14, written many, many, many years later by a king, he said, "Fools say in their hearts there is no God. They are corrupt and do evil things. None of them does anything good. The Lord looks down from heaven on humans to see if anyone is wise, to see if anyone seeks God. But all of them have turned bad. Everyone is corrupt. No one does good, not even one person." It's a very strong statement, and this is talking about our side of the flood, if you will. One more in Romans chapter 3. This is on this side of the AD or the Common Era. In Romans 3, an apostle Paul writes that both Jews and Gentiles are under the power of sin. There is no righteous person, not even one. No one who understands, no one who looks for God. There is no fear of God in their view of the world. Later on, he says this is a pretty familiar verse to some of you maybe, but in verse 23 he says, "All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God," which is a pretty strong stance on humankind. So although this is a very, very intense view of what humanity is, it's a common trend throughout the Bible that there's something about human beings that we are corrupted from our good intentions. That we were meant to be good, we were meant to love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind. We were meant to love our neighbor as ourselves. We were meant to have no selfish intention about us. And yet something has gone awry, something is corrupted in each one of us. And that is pretty harsh, but it's not just talking about these people. It also turns the lens and points at ourselves. Which is intense, I understand, but it is definitely a truth throughout the Bible. Now, I will give one disclaimer. People have used texts like these sometimes to justify hatred towards other human beings, or hatred towards non-believers or outsiders. That's completely foolish for 2 reasons. One is that this is a universal claim on all human beings, whether a Christian or not, whether a believer or not, whether religious or not, whether moral or not, that all of us are corrupted, all of us have fallen short of the glory of God. So to use that to justify hatred towards a certain people group or towards a certain religious group, that's foolish. A person who really believes in the Bible should have a pretty humble theological stance, knowing that you're really no better than I am. Whatever it is that has corrupted you to such evil actions is in me too. Were it not for the grace of God, I might be in the same position that you're in. Okay, so there's no good reason for that. And the second reason why I think that is a foolish stance is because the Bible also does indicate that we are something pretty special as people. not every verse is about how terrible we are. Okay, the Bible says that we're created in God's image, that there's something really unique and beautiful about us, that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. I don't know of a book that has a higher view of the creation of people, that we're pretty special, that God really loves us, but we're kind of jacked up. So that's the general idea throughout this state of the Bible. Okay, and that kind of makes the corruption a little bit worse. You know, you can imagine. I eat kale sometimes, like a lot now. I don't know why. It's cheap and I kind of like it. You can saute it or just eat it in a salad. You know, it's pretty nice. Okay, most of my roommates hate kale. They hate it a lot. John, your general feelings of kale? Meh, he's just meh. Okay, so if I had like kale and it went bad, your thoughts on that would be, yeah, he probably doesn't care too much. Okay, but if I had like a giant steak, you know what I'm saying, in the fridge, A1 sauce, whatever you like on it, it's a beautiful piece of meat, and it went bad, nobody ate it, and I didn't share it with my roommates. Thoughts on that would be not as good. Yeah, you'd be pretty upset. Okay, so how intrinsically valuable something is kind of makes the corruption even that much worse. You know what I mean? So if we weren't really that special, if we didn't have that great of intentions, and we went sour, it is what it is. But this is like destroying the Mona Lisa. You know what I'm saying? Like the Bible has a very, very high view on what human beings are supposed to be, and it's saying that we've gone sour. Something that had really good intentions went really, really badly. Okay, state of humankind. Done. Let's move on. Okay? God's response to humankind's corruption. And it's going to get a little tougher. I'm just going to be honest with you. Okay? God's response to humankind's corruption. All right, we're going to read verses 6 and 7. Okay, here's what it says. The Lord regretted making human beings on the earth, and he was heartbroken. The Lord regretted making human beings on earth, and he was heartbroken. So the Lord said, I will wipe off from the land the human race that I've created, from human beings to livestock, to the crawling things, to the birds of the sky, because I regret that I ever made them. Okay, so we see kind of a feeling and an acting response. Okay, a feeling and an acting response. The feeling-wise, it says he's heartbroken. The word for regretted, I don't know what your versions say. I don't actually love the word regret. The Hebrew word is, ready, so it has a ch sound. I love this much. Nacham. Nacham. Anybody want? You should try it. Just try it. Nacham. Oh, isn't that fun? So much fun. Yeah. So the Hebrew word nacham, it isn't so much as like, oh, I changed my mind, or shoot, I made a mistake. It's more like a very, very, very deep, sorrowful grieving that something has been done. So he was very, very deeply, sorrowfully grieving. He was heartbroken that he had made humanity and that humanity had gone sour. That everything that they had thought up in their minds was evil. So we have a heartbroken God. This is so counter to what the other narratives of the flood say. If you're familiar with like Gilgamesh or something like that, and there's a couple other ones, all of them, every culture in the Near East was polytheistic except for this particular religion. It was unique in that way. It was unique in the fact that it only felt that there was one God. And in the other stories, it's just the gods that are like, hey, let's mess with the people and kill them all off. You know, or one of the main characters ticked off one of the gods and he was like, I'm going to flood you. I'm just going to kill all of them. You know, they have no remorse for this. Most of them are actually the bad guys in this story. In this story, God's definitely the main character. That's the way it is. And he's heartbroken over where humanity is. Okay, so that's kind of where he's at. But in his doing, so that's his feeling response, he's moved to heartbreak, but in his doing, he says he's going to wipe out human beings. He's going to wipe out the creepy crawly things and the birds and all that stuff. Pretty intense reaction. And why on earth do we use this as a children's story in Sunday school? Why does that happen? I don't know. I mean, I did. I mean, I don't know if you grew up in church, by the way. Then, you know, Sunday school is, you know, like you have your little classes in the morning. I mean, it's self-explanatory. It's like a school class on Sunday. I guess that's why they call it that. But, you know, Noah's Ark is like #1 story out there. It's about like the annihilation of humankind. Why do we do that? I don't know. It's one of the darkest stories in the Bible, but there's animals. Oh, it's so cute. Little monkey out the window. I'm not sure there were even windows. So I just don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if I'll teach my kids Noah's Ark when they're little. That might be like a 16 years old, we can talk about Noah's Ark now. I don't know. I don't know when that'll happen, but it's kind of strange. But I get it. Their animals are cute. My nephew has a Noah's Ark room, so I'm not hating out there. I just think it's funny. some criticisms out there and some feelings. Even when I read this, I have some feelings in my heart. Like, geez, is this really fair? Is it really fair to for God to do that, to wipe out all of humanity for going corrupted? Because didn't He make them in the first place? You know what I mean? So shouldn't He have some responsibility for that? Isn't that like GM, like when all their cars went bad? What if the people in GM took no responsibility and were like, it's the cars. The cars did it. You know what I mean? Like, don't blame us. It's the cars. So I think there's some good logical reason for people to feel critical of that. But as I started thinking about it more, and the common response is like, I don't want a God who, and I've heard that from so many people in my life. So many friends who maybe identify as spiritual but not religious. They like certain parts of the Bible, not other parts. They pick and choose. And often the response is, I don't want a God who. I couldn't serve a God that does X, Y, or Z. And when I think about this story, I think the question that I started to ask myself, and maybe imaginatively ask these friends of mine, is what kind of God do you want then? You know, what kind of God is it that you imagine having? Because I could see in this scenario, you could have a God that just winks slyly at corruption, that just lets that happen, that is totally cool with human beings killing each other and not being at all what they were supposed to be. I can see a God who makes moral robots so that they have no choice of their moral actions, and then He can just make them all perfect. They have no choice, they have to do good, then there would be no corruption, but there would be none of that creative potential that we talked about. So you could have a God that just winks slyly at corruption. You could have a God that makes moral robots, so none of this bad would ever happen. You could have a God who just spins the world into creation and then steps away and doesn't care anymore about it, or doesn't care about you. That gives you no existential reason for your life. He just spins it and walks away. Deism is what that's called. I guess that God wouldn't have to do this. You could have a God who does care about corruption, that is righteous, but is unable to do anything to stop it. But, I mean, I would say a lot of times when people ask this question, why would this happen? I want a God that. What they're saying is, I want to create a God that's subjected to my ideas. I want to create a God. I want a God that lives by my code of conduct, that does what I think is right. I don't want to be subjected to a God. I don't want to be created in God's image. I want to create a God after my own image. And I know you people. I don't want a God that's after your image. No offense. I mean, I know me, and I definitely don't want a God that's after my image. So if that is a concern in your heart, totally get it. Wrestle with it, but ask yourself, like, if that's you, then what kind of God is it that you do want? And is He compromising on righteousness? Or is He compromising on justice? Or are you just looking for a God that serves your needs? So what we see about God is He is heartbroken over human corruption, but He can't let it stand. That's not what He'll do. So He says that He's going to wipe out everybody, like it never happened, like creation never was. But theme 3, and this is a good one, okay? So we got the bad news out of the way. We can get to the good news, all right? Theme 3 is God's grace and humankind's salvation. God's grace and humankind's salvation. Take your time writing. Okay. Let's look at Genesis 6, 8 through 9. Let's do this, okay? Here's what it says. But as for Noah, the Lord approved of him. We'll talk about that. I think some of your versions probably say it better. These are Noah's descendants. It says, in his generation, Noah was a moral and exemplary man who walked with God. Now, the actual phrasing of that, I said, my version says the Lord approved of him, but the actual word's much better, and hopefully maybe what some of your Bibles say is that Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. That is the literal mention. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And then it says that he was a moral, exemplary man who walked with God. Okay, so what we have here is that he found grace. It does not say that he earned it. It does not say that his moral walking is what allowed him to find grace in God's eyes, but potentially. But what he does, and we're not actually going to read a lot about the flood, but I mean, you might be familiar with it. If you're not, I'll tell you that God chooses Noah and his sons and their wives and his wife and a few animals, and he loads them up into a giant ark that would fit roughly in the size of the shoe, according to the dimensions that they did. Okay, and God spares humanity. Although at one point he says, "I'm going to wipe them all out," there's one person that finds grace in God's eyes, and he decides to spare this cursed race through this person. Okay? Now, a lot of times, what's taught is like Noah was a great guy, and that's what did it. And it's almost mentioned like God did some kind of like Darwinian gene selection, you know? Like Noah's okay, everyone else sucks, but Noah's okay, so we'll start over with him, and maybe we'll root out the bad. Well, that's theologically inaccurate. Okay, God saved a cursed race. That happened, you know. He saved our race, cursed as it was, through Noah. So God saved us by His grace. He makes a way, and that's a theme that we're going to see. You will see over and over in the Bible. We're even going to talk about a little bit that He always makes a way. Okay, so God's grace, humankind's salvation, and then the very, very last theme is humankind's sacrifice and God's covenant. And we're gonna flip over to the very end of chapter 8. Humankind's sacrifice and God's covenant. Okay. All right, I'm going to start reading right now in 8:20, and we're just going to read 20, 21, and 22. Here's what it says. Noah built an altar to the Lord. He took some of the clean large animals and some of the clean birds and placed entirely burned offerings on the altar. So he offered up these animals to God. And the Lord smelled the pleasing scent, and the Lord thought to himself, I will not curse the fertile land anymore because of human beings, since the ideas of the human mind are evil from their youth. I will never again destroy every living thing as I have done, as long as the earth exists. Seed time and harvest, cold and hot, summer and autumn, day and night will not cease. And he goes on further in chapter 9 to elaborate this covenant that he makes with people. He says, I'm going to promise that I won't do this anymore. I won't destroy the world by flood. As long as these things happen, I'm not going to do what I've done before. And then that's where the rainbow comes from. We know that Genesis explains that the rainbow is a sign of God's covenant to us. That he's not binding the covenant on human beings. He's binding himself to a covenant, saying, I will not do this, and when I see the rainbow, I'm going to remember that I promised I'll never wipe you out with flood again. I promise that will never happen again. So we have humankind sacrificing God's covenant. So Noah offers this costly sacrifice, okay? And that's something to think about. We say the word sacrifice, you usually think two things, right? You either think of like old-timey people killing animals, you know, or you think of like giving something up. You know, like, oh, I sacrificed my weekend to babysit for a friend instead of going to the movies. I don't know. Okay, you know, you give something up, okay? And that's definitely here. Noah offers a pretty costly sacrifice. When we're talking about giving an animal, like every animal's an endangered species at this point, you know what I'm saying? So that's that, and these belong to him. These would be cattle. These would be the things that would provide him food, sustenance, milk, offspring, all those things. And he's cutting off one of each of those, offering it. So it's something that means a lot to him, and he's sacrificing it to God. And upon that, God offers His covenant to him, giving him a promise. Now this is quite a foreshadow, and really the Bible is pretty rich with this theme of sacrifice and covenant. You'll see that moving forward. Okay, so it's pretty cool that Noah offers a sacrifice that means something to him, and then God binds Himself to this covenant that I won't destroy you. Okay, so those are four pretty big themes that we see throughout the story. That are generally true of God, and what the Bible says are generally true about us and how we relate to Him. And I know some of it's pretty bad news as far as that goes, especially the first two. So really, at that point, you have to ask yourself, well, what are we supposed to do with this? You know, what's the moral? What's the practical application? Now, when I was in Sunday school, here was what the moral was. Okay, it was so, you know, little Caleb, be like Noah. All right, you should be like Noah. You know, everyone else out there was bad. Everyone else out there was partying. You know, that's like the staple sin that church people give. Partiers. I don't even know what that means. So everyone else out there was a partier, you know, and Noah was a good little church kid who went to church. You know, so you should do that, Caleb. You should be good. You should be exemplary. That's what it says about him. It says he was blameless. Okay? So you should do that. Well, I don't know, probably when I was like a day old, I stopped being blameless, I think, I don't know. And I've never been able to carry that on. So if you carry that expectation, sometimes given by very, very religious, devout people, that you need to live up to a certain standard, if you just be like Noah, then God will save you and not everyone else because you're going to be so good. You will be crushed by that. You will absolutely be crushed by that. Because I'm just telling you, I was a pretty good kid, all right? So you can do a background check on me. I was pretty good. A lot of gold stars in Sunday school. Far from blameless. Far from it. Okay, there's things in my life that I would weep in shame to tell you about me. And I'm sorry, that's heavy, but it's true. Okay, so and I'm not saying I'm the best or anything, but I'm just saying I don't know how anyone could live under those pressures or standards. I tried it for a while. I thought that that's what God really wanted from us, was to be like Noah, to be as good as Jesus, to be the right, just as good as you possibly can. It's going to be fine. If you take that as the moral of the story, you will live a crushing life. Never able to. Whenever you think that you're succeeding, you're going to be so full of pride. I was the proudest. Oh man, I was such a hypocrite. And then whenever you fail, which you often will, you're going to feel like you're just worthless. Okay. So one of my favorite authors, he says that kids should sue their Sunday school teachers for malpractice when they teach them that the moral of these Old Testament stories is to be like such and such, to have the character of so and so, because you're just leading people to live a life of impossible goals. Okay, so here's what I would tell you. All right, it's kind of a double bind when you do that, because we think, okay, well, Caleb, that's fine. I understand that I can't be blameless. I can't get rid of this corruption inside of me. I know that I'm a selfish person. I know that I've done things, think things on a regular basis that I would be ashamed to speak in front of God about if He exists. So I can't do that. But you're also telling me that God just can't wink at corruption, right? That's something that He can't stand beside. So what do we do? And I told you we're crazy about Jesus, so you should be ready for that. It's coming, all right? In Luke 24, and I don't even think I'll read from it, but there's a passage after Jesus Christ resurrects from the dead. He's talking to some people, and he's explaining to them who he was. And he says in a very cool place, he says, don't you know, basically, that all this scripture that you're holding, which would have been the Hebrew Bible, or from Genesis to Malachi, all of that is about me. He says the books of Moses, the Psalms, the prophets, all of that was written to point to me. My favorite ever children's Bible, ever, is called the Jesus Storybook Bible. So good. So good. I may have owned a copy just for myself for a while when I was 22, so don't worry about it. But the subtext of that, Jesus Storybook Bible, and the subtext says every story whispers his name. Yeah, every story whispers his name. And so I would submit to you that the real moral of the story, and this is kind of where you have your last blank, is that Jesus is a truer and better Noah. And I'm borrowing that language from another author. Hopefully that's okay with you. Jesus is a truer and better Noah. Okay, so if we look to this story and say, okay, the moral of the story is I got to be like Noah. Like I said, you're setting yourself up. But if you look at it and realize that Jesus was the Noah that Noah couldn't even be, then I think that there's something that makes this story so much more incredible to me, so much more freeing to me as well. Let me give you a couple of things that I've thought through, okay? So Noah is still a cursed member of the human race, okay? He still has that on. He still has sin in his blood and his bones, and he carried that on. Okay, so yeah, he did bring salvation to an extent to human race, but he can't make us clean. You know what I mean? Noah is still a cursed member of the human race. Christ was a pure, perfect human, no corruption in it, not a spot in it. Noah was a man who walked with God, and that's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool way to be described, I'm not going to lie. You know, if they said, oh, that was Caleb, he walked with God, I would be cool with that being on my tombstone. You know what I mean? Noah was a man who walked with God, but Christ was God who became man for our sake. A lot of times he's prophesied to be the man, the God with us, is what some call him. Noah brought salvation for his family, and granted, that carried down to us. But Christ offers salvation to all of us to join God's family, to be adopted as sons and daughters. Quite different. Noah offered a costly sacrifice to God, and like we said, certainly it was. He offered one of each of his best. At a time when there wasn't much, he offered a costly sacrifice to God, but Christ became the costliest sacrifice, a one-and-done securement of our acceptance in God's presence. A much better sacrifice. Noah foreshadowed the old covenant of continual sacrifices, but Christ brings in the new covenant powerfully, allowing us to once again walk with God blameless in His sight. Noah was pretty cool. I mean, he was recommended as a blameless guy, but Christ is the only one that I know of that can actually make us blameless. And so, that's about as application as I can give you, is don't worry about it. He's already did it. He already took care of that. So a couple questions that I think I could ask is, do you know this truer and better Noah? Do you know Jesus? Do you have this standard in your mind that you're trying to live up to, religious or not, that you're trying to be good enough? Or do you feel in your heart that you're just struggling to be what other people expect you to be, what you expect you to be, what you feel like a religious system expects you to be? Or have you put that trust in Christ to know that He makes you good enough, and you don't have to worry so much about that with your life in His hands? And then if that is you, then I would ask, and I ask myself the same question, have you reflected recently on what He has accomplished for you? Sometimes the good news gets to be old news, and we have to think on this. This is what defines us as a people. And lastly, if that is you, then are you really living for Him who died for you? And I don't mean that to be a guilt-provoking statement, but you know where your life's at, and I'll let you think about that. Okay? So what I'm going to do is just quickly pray for us, and then I think Chris has another song, yeah. And then you should hang around and socialize and probably eat or something like that. Okay? All right, let's pray. God, you're a holy and perfect God. You don't turn a sly eye to our sin and corruption, and you don't soothe us with your words. God, you know me. You know that I can be such a people pleaser, a man pleaser, more concerned about the opinions of others than about who you are. But I do thank you that you're above that, God, that you are righteous and that you're holy and you're just. And I also thank you, God, that even in our corruption, that you have provided a way for us to be pure and blameless and to stand in your sight, that we can praise the one who paid our debt and that you raised these lives up from the dead. God, I thank you that you brought us life through Christ. I thank you that the story of the Bible is not be good enough, work hard enough, follow the right rules. But the real story of the Bible is that you make us good enough through Christ's sacrifice, and a life of trust and obedience is the natural response from that, God. Help us to be a people shaped by that news, God, by the good news of who you are. And I know that's not something we can ever repay, and that's the point. But I pray that you just help us to be grateful and live lives of sacrifice back to you. And I ask these things in Jesus' name.